All right, well, it's 7:02. I think we're just going to go ahead and get started with the event tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We have been so excited and putting a lot of hard work and putting this event together for us to build an event that will not only touch on how to use LinkedIn, but also how to properly use it to its fullest potential. As the name of the event suggests, Learn Link LinkedIn will hopefully teach you a lot tonight, where you will learn lots about LinkedIn and how to maintain professional and personal relationships, but also help you link with professionals in the field where you can find internships and also maintain these lifelong relationships you will have in your professional life.
So with that, huge thank you to Professor Prang for being here tonight. I know she's got a lot of great information for everyone, so please be as active as possible. Feel free to ask any questions and unmute yourself whenever you have something. And we'll also be participating in some Mentimeter polls. So lots of active participation, and yeah, feel free to ask questions. So with that, pass it on to you, Professor. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate having this opportunity to present some material on LinkedIn that might be a little bit different than what people typically think about when they think about LinkedIn, besides connections. So we're going to start by doing a little poll. If our participants can jump on menti.com, I promise you don't have to set up an account. It's super easy. Get on menti.com and punch in that code. And then we just want to get a feel for who's here tonight as far as you're in school. So how many freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors we might have. And that's going to kind of help me answer some questions along the way as well. I love to see our freshmen participating. That's good. Okay, it's 19. That's about most people, I think. How many participants do we have? Do you know?
24.
24, okay. So it's 22, oh, that's up right. Okay, so we have a bulk of freshmen and sophomores, which is really nice. That's going to help me answer some questions and also direct you as we go through this little workshop and guide some advice. I'm happy we have our juniors as well. So it's going to be pertinent information to everybody. The next thing, so we're still on Mentimeter, is, and I love me some word clouds. If you all can type in a few words that come to mind when you think about LinkedIn, but you're not allowed to say connection and you're not allowed to say networking. So other words that you think about when you think about LinkedIn. That probably stumps everybody because we know it's about connecting, we know it's about networking, but what else is it about? So definitely all the things we're seeing, definitely a professional platform. We know it's very, very different than the social platforms that we use. I wouldn't even consider LinkedIn really social media per se, because you're going to use it so much differently. And the rules kind of and the criteria for how you use LinkedIn, very, very different than what we know in Instagram. And I know you all don't use Facebook very much, but Facebook, TikTok, all those things, very, very different. So yes, professional, the personal brand is something we're going to touch on tonight a lot in a bigger concept than you think about sometimes. Definitely for searching for internships, opportunities, yes, personal growth for sure. All these things that you hit on here, which is really good. I'm proud of you for using different words than the words we would typically think about when we think about LinkedIn. So the next Mentimeter is, I just want to know, how often do you actually use LinkedIn? Meaning, when I say utilize it, do you actually go on there and read articles? Are you going on your time frame or your timeline and reading things? How often do you actually get on LinkedIn? I'll tell you, that's actually more than I thought it was. Sometimes I'm pretty bad sometimes if I haven't been on there in a while. And honestly, this is one of these things where I'm going to tell you to do a lot of things. And I tell myself, I need to be doing these things as well. So I'm glad to see that people are on there at least once or twice a week and some people every day. So that's really good. As I tell you some of the things that I think you should be doing on LinkedIn, I'm happy to see this because I think you'll actually do these things. So let's get started now that we have some information about who is listening tonight. That's going to help me. So this is what we're doing. We're going to go through some what I call basics. So some profile things. If you're a freshman, you might be in Compass One now, or you might be taking it very soon. And they're going to go over a lot of the LinkedIn basics about your profile, about setting up the experience section, all those things. So tonight, the review, the part about the profile is kind of a review. So we're not going to spend a ton of time there because I want to get to the second part where we talk about making the most of this platform to build what I call your networking muscle. And then we definitely want to leave time at the end for Q&A for any kind of things you have to ask about LinkedIn. So I say when we get to that second part, when we talk about building our networking muscle, before you get really active on LinkedIn, on some of the things I'm gonna challenge you to do, which is posting and being active on the platform and showing recruiters and employers where you want to go and what you're interested in. You do want to make sure your profile is up to speed and cleaned up and edited and up to date, because if you post something in LinkedIn, then usually people go and look at your profile next. That's what I do. If I see an article that's really interesting or something pops up on my timeline, the next thing I do is go look at the person's profile. So really basic, when you start with a profile picture, and I'll tell you this, like all this does not come out of my brain. This comes from LinkedIn. Your best resource on how to use LinkedIn is LinkedIn itself. And at the end of the presentation, I have some resources for you. One is a LinkedIn blog, and I'll show you that. But LinkedIn is the best place to go to learn how to actually use the platform. We know that if you Google information, tons and tons of people write information about LinkedIn. My go-to source is the platform itself and the people that work there. So this is from LinkedIn saying this is how your profile picture should be, not the example that's shown for the reasons that are listed here. So it should look like you, meaning several years ago, I had very, very short hair. Very short hair, like you probably wouldn't even recognize me. And now my hair is much longer. Well, my profile picture on LinkedIn should look like me now. It shouldn't be an old shot of me with short hair. That wouldn't make sense. So your profile picture should look like what you look like now. Ideal size, it tells you there, 400 by 400 pixels, high resolution, not a picture of a picture. And this is interesting. So your face, they say, should fill 60% of the photo space. So that's what it should be focused on. Obviously, in this picture, this person, it's a clip of another picture. You see someone's hand around her shoulder. It's not a good resolution. The background is obviously somewhere probably social. So it does not resonate with a LinkedIn platform, right? That could be Facebook, that could be Instagram, but it's really not LinkedIn. Versus this picture, which probably because I cut and pasted onto this presentation, it's not as clear as it really is. Much more focused on that person's image. So the lighting, especially in your profile, is important. Have good lighting. You can see in this one, the lighting is really, really harsh on that person's face versus this is more balanced. They say wear solid colors. This person's wearing, a pattern, but it's not super busy. And LinkedIn has all sorts of filters. You all probably already know this, but you can use filters as well as adjust the brightness and contrast of your picture, which I actually didn't know that. So I went in and adjusted my profile picture, which had a lot of white lighting in it, and used the adjustments for the brightness and contrast in there. I'm not going to click on that link right now because I'm a little worried about time, but you can use that link there. Actually, this is a LinkedIn blog that talks all about your profile picture and what it should look like. The other thing, let me just go back for just a second, that they talk about is here, wearing kind of what you would wear to work, which means that if you're intending to go into, let's say, banking or investment banking or something where it's a much more formal work setting, then your picture should probably reflect where you want to work. So if you're going in that environment, you would probably want to have a suit jacket on, maybe even a shirt and tie, and look more formal versus if you're going in a direction like if you're going to go work for American Eagle and you have a suit profile picture, that probably doesn't tell them that that's where you intend to go. So when they say wear what you would wear to work, it's wearing what you see in the industry that people wear. And we'll talk about how you know that as we move forward. So there's tips on your profile. Let me jump on LinkedIn here and I'll show you a couple of examples. Let me actually go to a different one here. Bear with me, find my right screenshot. I want to show you a couple people that I know that are, so Shira Etter, she actually works for a marketing company. So you see her, this is the other thing is when you put in your cover photo, that's where you can maybe use a little more expression. But your profile picture should be professional. So Shira is an alumni of Kelly. I actually worked with her at the UCS. Very nice photo of her, focused on her face, simple background, not necessarily smiling, but that's fine. She has a smile on her face. Let's look at Martin. So Martin Aguinas, another Kelly alum. He worked at Google. He's currently in grad school at Stanford. Nice profile picture, a little more casual, right? He's not wearing a tie. They probably don't do that at Google, but a very professional, nice lighting, very good picture of him in that photo. Look at Tal Nelson, who's an alumni who works in the engagement office at Kelly. Again, you know, a little more casual, but she has kind of a business look to her. But nice lighting, professional picture. And I realize that you may not be able to get a professional picture right now, but I think the point of that is to follow these examples. And even if a friend's taking this picture of you, you can still have a good quality picture and follow these guidelines for your profile photo. Just a couple other things is that these are really easy things to do on LinkedIn is to customize your URL. You do that in your profile settings. So their advice is to make the address your own. So typically the default is your name with a bunch of numbers afterwards. And it's very easy to go in and just clip it and just use your name as I've done here. If your first and last name might be more common, it can be taken. Then if you have to adjust it, just make sure you're making small modifications for it. You might put your middle initial in there. And then you can include this smaller, more personalized URL on your resume and also in your email signature. So that's something very easy to do in your profile setting. The other thing is to think as you're writing your summary, and you'll practice this for freshmen in Compass 1 and for sophomores that you've already done this, or juniors. Remember back when you were writing your summary, the advice from LinkedIn is to write it in first person. So I've seen people write it with their name, like Kirsten likes to do this, which I think is kind of odd. But again, if you're going into a more formal setting, you might write it in a third person voice, much like you write your resume. It really depends where you're going. For the most part, you'll see people write it in first person. And the best thing to do is just to do a search for other profiles to look at their summaries in the industries you want to go to. So LinkedIn tells us that the top 5 fields when people are doing keyword searches, like for recruiters, are these things: your name, your headline, a location, summary, and experience. These are also all under the profile edit section, and you should make sure that you have these items filled out here. The region, location, and industry that you are wanting to go into. If anyone has questions too along the way, just please ask them. And then as you think about filling out your experience, here's something that a lot of people ask. Should I just repeat my bullet points from my resume? And what are the pros and cons for that? So here are my personal feelings about that. I feel like there's two things you have to make sure of what you're doing with LinkedIn and your resume is that they both are consistent and accurate. So if you're making updates to your resume, but then you don't update your LinkedIn and a recruiter has your resume and then they go look at your LinkedIn and they don't look identical, they don't look consistent, that's, I don't want to say a red flag, but a cautionary flag. So make sure as you're putting experience on LinkedIn or if you're adding it to your resume that they're consistent. I feel like for LinkedIn, it's easy just to cut and paste your bullet points. You can do that. I don't want to say that's wrong to do that, but there's an opportunity on LinkedIn to write something in a little bit different format, maybe a little bit more narrative, and to add a slight bit of your personality in there. So on my LinkedIn profile, it's kind of a mixture of some bullet points, but I do some narrative writing in there, not really long, not an essay. So I think, again, it's looking at profiles of people in the industries you want to go to and seeing what they're doing and mimicking to that to some extent. So I'm not going to say there's a yes or no about the bullet points. My personal feeling is that one, you just make sure it's consistent, and two, that you do have an opportunity to have a little more personality and write a little more narratively on LinkedIn. The other thing that LinkedIn talks about a lot is trying to use keywords in, if you're going to use your bullet points, or if you're going to be more narrative in your experience. And those keywords are the words that you find in internship descriptions of internships you're interested in, or in the industries you're going into. So as you're looking at internships, even if you're a freshman and you're like, I might want to go into consulting, or I might want to go into analyst work, and you look at descriptions of these internships, you'll see keywords in there, and you're going to try, naturally, not going to force it if it's not right, to use some of those keywords in the experience section of LinkedIn. Because if there's a computer involved, it's looking for those keywords, right, when recruiters are searching for you. So trying in your profile to use some of those keywords from the industry that you're interested in, or from job descriptions, internship descriptions that you see. And they say to focus on context, actions, and results, which sounds very similar to writing in star format for your bullet points or your accomplishment statements. So that's all I was going to go over as far as like a profile section, and that's really more of review. There are, when we get to the end, I show you the LinkedIn blog. There are many blogs, and it's very similar to if you go to Canvas guides, that you can type in any topic and find basically a guide on that. There are plenty of resources to guide you through setting up your profile, in addition to what you learn in Compass One. So we're going to spend a ton of time here because I really wanted to talk to you about what you should be doing on LinkedIn to improve your personal brand, but also to stand out to recruiters. So I just want to pause a second to see if anyone has questions specifically about like setting up your profile, or questions you have about your profile content.
I guess I can start us off. Just a quick question I had is, like, for example, if I write a little description about like an experience I had, how many sentences do you think is maybe too many, or do you think like 2 is enough, or like what are your thoughts there?
I think 3 to 5, really. 5 is probably like a sweet spot because it's kind of a paragraph, but it's not too long. And here's the other thing is, like, you're trying to show people that you can write in a concise manner and say like what I'm trying to get at. It's basically practicing the bullet points of your resume, right? So I'd say 3 to 5. And I think I probably wouldn't do more than 5. Yeah, that's my thing. Good question.
I guess building off of that, are there any like specific, like let's say you're in like clubs or you volunteer or something, are there specific like sections that you would maybe use sentences for instead of bullet points?
So if you're going to use bullet points, it's just like your resume too, like being consistent. So I've seen people, and this is kind of, you could do like a little intro, maybe 3 to 5 sentences introducing an experience, and then have 2 or 3 bullet points underneath it. So you have a little narrative and then some bullet points. I would keep it pretty consistent. Solo bullet points, when you look at a LinkedIn profile, kind of looks like cut and paste. So it almost feels like this person isn't spending a lot of time like on their profile, they're just repeating their resume, versus if you write a little narrative beforehand and then include a couple bullet points, where you can't do that on your resume. If you do that on your resume, someone's going to tell you take that narrative off because we don't need a story on your resume. So that's where LinkedIn gives you a little more flexibility. I mean, you have the ability to kind of make it your own, versus a resume as we teach it, Kelly, is pretty tight. Let me see. Let me do this. Let's pull up. Let's go to mine. So this is mine, and you can see where like I have more of a narrative on there for when I worked at the Career Center. It's much more kind of touchy-feely, and it's longer. Like that probably should be smaller, but I say I have the privilege of working daily with talented students. A little more touchy-feely. Looking back on it, like I would cut that. It's a little long, and I included a video from the UCS versus these other jobs I've had, much smaller, but I probably was more focused up here because I was in higher ed. I intend to stay there, and probably focused a little more my energy there. And then my older positions are tighter. This one where I spent 10 years on, this is probably more where I meant a resume. But even then, here's a position, the chain account executive, where I was there for 3 years, but I only have a short clip there. So I think too is, excuse me, where you can shine the most is maybe where you put the most information, versus, if it's not there is anything wrong with service jobs, but if you're a server or something and you have that on your resume, maybe that's where it's only 2 or 3 sentences. But as you get more experience, and especially experience in the areas that you want to highlight, then that's where you focus the energy and more of your content. Excuse me. We're ready to move? Okay, we'll move forward. And if you have any other questions.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Yeah, for sure.
So for like the profile pic, do you think it's okay if I use like my high school graduation picture?
I would probably try to get a new one. Yeah, okay. I think, and I realize, yeah, we don't have a lot of options right now. Like we're not doing headshots like Kelly, where you'd normally be able to get that done. But even if you had, you can take it. I mean, cell phone cameras are just as good as regular cameras now. I think it's just all how you set it up. But I would probably do a college photo. Yeah, because you probably look different a little bit, maybe.
It was like 6 months ago, so not so much.
That's not so long. If it looks professional, is it like in a suit?
Yeah, it's in a suit. Yeah, that's why. Because it was like a professional picture when I was in a suit, so that's why. It's like why I picture I chose that one.
Yeah, you can use that. I mean, because that's probably not going to like say, hey, this is high school. When you say graduate, like high school, I think like graduation. But yeah, I mean, if it's in a suit, and then when you get the opportunity, probably maybe at the end of this year or next year, you could do one like at Kelly. But if it's in a suit, that'd be good. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about what I call building your networking muscle. And so these are things that I want you to start thinking about becoming a practice and really being involved in LinkedIn, beyond like, hey, I need to make connections. And we're gonna talk about that as well, and how to connect with alumni especially. But these are things that I want you to start doing, because one, it starts to show recruiters and the people you want to network with, what your intentions are. And when I say that, like right now, you could be interested in consulting, and you, a year from now, decide that's not what you're going to do. That's fine. But whatever you're kind of interested in right now, I want you to start showing that on LinkedIn by picking topics. And I say genuinely interested versus like, don't try to pick topics that are you're trying to impress people, because that's not going to work. One, we're always trying to be authentic and genuine in this process. And people that are authentic and genuine go so much farther, and you'll enjoy it more. So I want you to pick topics that you're interested in, businessy type topics, especially for LinkedIn, professional development type topics, or personal development type topics. And I want you to start posting things. I'm going to show you how, and then follow groups that kind of pertain to that topic. So if you're into like disruptive innovation, there's also podcasts of people that talk about that, and you can follow groups in that area. But starting to show this theme on LinkedIn of what you're interested in. In particular, like if you're thinking about recruiting in certain areas, then those are the type of topics that you want to start putting on LinkedIn, because that's going to show recruiters, hey, I really am interested in this industry. Doesn't mean you're married to it, but I'm interested in it. And you will find that when you start doing these things, you will organically pick up contacts. It just works that way. I'm sure there's all sorts of fancy algorithms out there that I'm not going to explain, but it works because I've done it and I've had students do this. So here's what I'm talking about. One is called just like personal insights. So these are kind of things that you post if you're following blogs, or you get newsletters. If you read a good book that's more like personal development, that kind of will show the values you have as they relate in a business manner, or if you're really strategic, you're looking at companies and following companies that you're interested in possibly working for, and trying to resonate with some of the values the company shows through their website or through their job descriptions. So these two examples, Jason, I think it's Pfeffer, is an entrepreneur. He's the editor-in-chief for Entrepreneur Magazine, and he does a podcast, and he has this newsletter called the Pfeffer 5. And so this person reposted, hey, the Pfeffer 5 is pure gold. The most recent edition includes one of my core beliefs. So right away, this person's kind of not only like posting part of this newsletter, but also saying, this is one of my core beliefs. Good things aren't accidental. And he does a good job of actually tagging the editor-in-chief, who then commented on the article. So it seems really simple, but you're trying to set a theme of what's important to you. The other one is Precious Price, and Precious is a grad of Kelly, both undergrad, and she graduated with the MSIS program. And she worked for Accenture when she first got out of Kelly, and was very much into women in tech, consulting and things like that. And now she's actually doing her own brand strategy consulting business. She has a podcast. She is LinkedIn coach. She did an excellent job. And her profile, I believe, is public. You can see excellent job on LinkedIn while she was a student as well, just posting things about what she's interested in. You knew right away when you looked at her profile and you looked at her activity, what she was into. She was into technology, she was into consulting, and she was into brand strategy. And so this is just kind of a personal insight she wrote, just something out of her head, and then she tags it back to her material. So you can start off, if you're following blogs and newsletters, picking up on something that really means something to you, and posting some personal insights. This is Martin McGinnis, who is a Kelly alum. I think he's 5 years out now, worked for Google. He's on the Forbes 30 and 30, under 30. Super successful alum, nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. He actually spoke to my Compass 2 class last spring. I traveled to Greece with him. He does an excellent job on LinkedIn. You definitely know what he's into. You definitely know what some of his personal values are. This is something he posted quite a while back But this was something he had talked about before, as you move forward in life, if you asked yourself, am I making, my little kid self proud? So this is like a personal insight. This is something that speaks to his values and what he believes in on a professional and business level. So these are just examples of like personal insights. The other thing you can do, which is this is easy as well, is start reposting or posting article links. And when you do that, make sure that you just don't grab an article and repost it without saying something about it. Either I found this really interesting, here's an insight I learned, or here's something I learned about this, or as this person did, actually pose a question out to the LinkedIn community. This person was a cohort of mine in my graduate program, and what she did really, really well before she was an instructional designer, and that's what we were in our master's program for, she started putting herself in that space before she became that. So that's what I want you to try to do is if you're interested in consulting, then find articles in consulting. Just use your good friend Google consulting articles or consulting blogs or investment banking, whatever you're going to go into, and start posting some articles with a question about the article. The thing I'm going to tell you though is if you do this question thing, you have to get back on LinkedIn, and if people respond, then respond to them so you can actually participate in the conversation you started. So this is an example of posing a question out to the community, reposting an article, but also starting to put yourself in the space you want to be in. This is something you all can do now. Posting about attending events, which right now, yes, they're going to all be virtual. I know that's not as exciting, but you can still attend virtual events and then post about them. This person, Jeffrey Moss, is also a Kelley alum, also went to school at Wharton, and he owns a company called Parker Dewey, which is virtual micro internships and virtual projects for college students to do. He comes from a higher ed background and is very into the whole theory of that students need to be prepared to work and that we shouldn't just be looking at people's GPA. He's very active on LinkedIn, and what he does well in this is he talks about an event, he links it to a bigger issue, and he always goes back to his company and why it's relevant to what his company does. It's a little bit longer post, there's a lot of tagging in there, but these give you examples of how I want you to start filling your timeline. And as you do this, I actually started practicing this and was really, really surprised at how many connections I started getting without even trying. And then also just that my own time, my own newsfeed started filling up with the things I was interested in. So those are really easy things that you can start doing. I say it's building your networking muscle because recruiters are going to look at your LinkedIn profile and they are going to go look to see like what your activity is. So I want to go back onto Martin's profile. He has a short summary. He actually does post articles and things, but people can see what kind of activity you're doing. So beyond like just liking other people's posts is actively posting yourself. So you see his reactions, his comments, and what he's posted. And these are things that are actually featured where he's posted articles about his presentations he did in China, his new company they started with some other people called Access Bell. But he's very, very active on LinkedIn. Let's see. And I'm not even talking about connections, right? But he has a lot of connections, but uses the platform to its full potential. And this is kind of just more of a little long-winded example, but if I was interested in advertising, this is just ways to find material to post on LinkedIn. So Adweek, very, very good newsletter, not just if you're going to advertising and marketing, but really touches on all sorts of business related articles from e-commerce to how companies are getting through COVID and whatnot. This kind of just walks you through. I find this interesting article about Walmart Plus, which is competing with Amazon Prime. And if you're in supply chain or operations or marketing or any of those things, that would be a great article to post and then say something about it. So you all can do this right now. You can attend virtual events, you can attend virtual webinars and start posting these things in those ways on LinkedIn. You do it pretty consistently. I don't know if you have to do like every single week. Once a week would be good. Once every other week would probably be okay too. But pretty consistently, if you want to start getting that kind of pattern on your LinkedIn that you're showing people this is where you want to go. So before I go into like showing you all how to find alumni, because those are the people I really think when you're saying who should I reach out to on LinkedIn, that you pick on alumni first because they're warm contacts. They may have questions about like posting on LinkedIn and the things that you can do to start kind of putting things on your your feed that recruiters will pick up on.
I have a question. So when we're posting about topics, are there any topics that we should avoid?
I think when it's LinkedIn, right, it's always professional. So I think it's businessy, industry-wide, or it's professional development, personal development. I think you stay away from politics, religion, all the things that are more of a Instagram, Facebook, that, right? I do think that LinkedIn, and here's why I've seen it. I have former colleagues, and one in particular, and it shows on LinkedIn as just someone that doesn't understand the platform. This individual posts a lot of like quotes, but they're very, trying to think, like it might have a picture of a kitten on there and a quote, and that just doesn't, to me, that's just not LinkedIn. Like you just put pictures of your pets, on LinkedIn and be like, hey, I had a great conversation with my dog. Like that's not, like, I think we all know that. And when people do it, to me, it just spotlights like doesn't belong on LinkedIn. So I do think like the articles you choose, it should be very compartmentalized on LinkedIn. It should be professional, personal development, career related, things like that. Yeah.
Would you say that if you have to think twice before posting it, that's like a good rule of thumb to follow, and like maybe you shouldn't post it?
Yeah, that's a really good life advice. You have to think twice about saying something or sharing a story or in an interview that you're like, I wonder if I should tell that story. Yeah, good thing is probably no.
And then we just have a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to bring up. So it's asking, would you recommend posting about an internship that you got? And if the answer is yes, when is the right way to do it? And like, I guess like, what is the wrong way to make that announcement?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen that as like kind of a new trend. And I'm sure the companies love it because if you tag the company, they're getting a spotlight. Hey, we're hiring, great talent from the Kelly School. And so, yeah, it's good for the company. I think you have to be a little cautious. I mean, lots of things can happen between the time you get an internship offer and, you could get it really in advance. There's nothing like posting something and then it doesn't happen or something goes wrong and you have to take it down or say a different announcement. I mean, I've seen people do it like they get into a college or they thought they did and it didn't work out. So I would say, yes, we want to be excited about it and post, but maybe it might be better to post the first week of your internship or the first week of your job. I just started with Granger, and I can't believe how great they treat their interns or something like that, and post once you get there, versus, because I've heard students have mixed feelings about that. It's, are you bragging? What is it really doing? Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it's like, why not wait till you get there? You'd have more to post about, and you're still giving the company kudos. And if you didn't like do a post, you can always put it in your profile, right? Like incoming intern, I've seen people do that. So that way you still are like, hey, I have an internship without doing the big post. You want me to keep going? Okay. So let's talk I'm trying to watch our time, so we have questions at the end too. Talk about connecting with alumni, where to find them, and how to do this the right way. You all know that we have a ton of alumni, and this is just showing Kelly, but I use a huge school, right? 725,000 IU alum. And if you just parse out the business school, so a huge amount of people. And I can't tell you how many alumni I talk to and ask them, do students reach out to you? And they're like, no, and I wish they would. These are the warmest contacts you can get, besides maybe like your immediate family. Alumni, and I'm talking about Hoosiers to Hoosiers. I don't know what it is about Hoosiers, but they love to help each other. So warm contacts, they want to help. They're familiar with your experiences at IU or if you're in Kelly. And this is such an easy way to build your professional network. They're easy to find. I'm going to show you how to find some of these people. What I want you to remember, whether it's alumni or reaching out to people on LinkedIn or however you're going to do this. And ultimately, we're like in the beginning, you're always doing these informational interviews because you're trying to find out more about the industry and what their careers are like. Always, and I heard someone say this best, like approach it from humility, curiosity, and active listening. And that when I say, what can you give in this relationship when you're like, should this give and take in networking, that's what you're going to give these people in the beginning because you're going to them for advice. If you're curious about them, if you're coming from a place of learning, you're never going to be like, hey, do you know of an internship I can have? I mean, that has to happen organically because as soon as someone thinks like that's the only reason you're contacting them, it's usually going downhill because people don't like to feel like you're just using them for that. And if you do it this way and you're patient with some gray areas where, hey, I might contact 10 different people to do informational interviews. I don't know if any 10 of those are going to directly get me to an internship, but I know that having those conversations are going to get me one more piece of information that maybe someone else doesn't have, or is going to send me in a trajectory that is going to make closer to the internship, then it's well worth your time and effort to talk to people. So that's what I want your attention to be. As far as LinkedIn, and if you're not a Kelly student, then every school, I'm sure, has like an official alumni association page on LinkedIn. So it could be informatics, whatever school you're in, they'll have one of these on LinkedIn. For Kelly, and most of them are probably groups where you have to actually like ask to become a member of the group. So for Kelly students, you can join this IU Alumni Association page, even though you're not alum yet. And then guess what? Then you have access to the people in that group, an easy way to connect with alumni through that LinkedIn page. So I'd recommend following or joining your school's alumni LinkedIn page. Make sure it's the actual official one because there's probably multiples out there. The other one I want you to do, and this one you can just follow, you don't have to join the group, is follow the IU Alumni LinkedIn grouped-in page for the same reason, because now you get to be on this page. One, it's going to start filling your newsfeed too with news about alumni. And as you read and see this, you'll be like, that might be an alumni I want to connect with. So I want you to follow those two pages, your school's alumni page, individual school, and then the overall IU Alumni Association LinkedIn page. And then a lot of people don't know this, but you all have access to the IU alumni directory with 725,000 members. So this link here, I'm going to jump on, and so let's see if I can get on my page to show you really quickly how this directory works. Go over here. So when you go to IU Alumni Association, you'll have to actually set up your account. I'm hoping my login here is saved. Oh, that's excellent. You all would go to new user registration and set up an account. And this was what I want to show you that I think is so cool that not many people know about, is you can go to the directories and resources once you have access to this and go to this alumni directory. So a lot of times we go on LinkedIn, right, and try to find people. So you just randomly search for LinkedIn. You may or may not be able to get to their profile. You might be able to message them through LinkedIn, you might not. But here you can actually find people's real emails. And the other thing that I read about too on LinkedIn is instead of always like going through LinkedIn and sending them a little message like, I want to be part of your LinkedIn group, which you should always personalize. Sometimes it's better to email them first and then connect with them on LinkedIn. Because a LinkedIn sometimes kind of feels like you don't have to put a lot of effort into that, but you do have to put some effort into emailing somebody. So I just want to show you real quick how this works. You can put in a bunch of information or just a little bit. So if I want to find somebody that works at Deloitte, an alum, and maybe I'm just going to put in Chicago, we're going to see what we get. I just want to show you what this does. Hopefully it'll work quickly. So between LinkedIn and alumni directories and alumni pages, that's how you're going to kind of sparse out and find the people that you want to connect with. And the question is like, who do I connect with and the right people? It's not necessarily the first person that pops up on your list. You want someone, obviously, that works in the industry that you're interested in, but then also pay attention to what they do. If you want to be an analyst, why would you reach out to someone in marketing necessarily? Like that person would be kind of confused. So you want to make sure you're reaching out to the right people, meaning the people that are most closely related to the things that you want to do. So this pops up these people here that, according to the database, work for Deloitte, or it says Chicago, but there's also someone from Indiana. You can see the classes. So you decide, like, how long ago do I want to talk to someone? Someone who graduated in 1998. It's going to be someone older with a lot more professional experience versus someone they might want to talk to that's 3 or 4 years out. You're going to have different questions, right? You're going to get different advice. You can see the degree they graduated with. Let's poke at, let's see what James has. So I pull this person up. It has their IU address on there, which sometimes concerns me because I don't know how long you all get to hang on to that. But although it doesn't give you a lot of information here, it says he works as a consultant with Deloitte Digital in Chicago. You could then go on LinkedIn and look this person up. On some of the emails, on most of the emails I find, they're like Gmails, so they're actual emails. I call this gold. The IU email may or may not work. I don't know how long you all get to keep that after you graduate. So that might not be the perfect example, but it gives you this information, which then you could go over to LinkedIn and find this person. So I just wanted to show it to you because it's a pretty amazing database for you to go find alumni in the areas you're interested in. And then we're not going to watch the little video, but if you're not aware of the LinkedIn alumni tool, it's pretty cool as well. It's another way of reducing the number of people you're trying to find. So you can use a LinkedIn alumni tool. This links to like a 2.5-minute video tutorial on it. Super easy. And you're basically can whittle alumni down from your school to location, to what they're doing, who they're working for. And then let's say you go on their LinkedIn profile and it's private and you can't get to them, then you go pop them in over at the alumni base, that database I just showed you, and see if you can find an email. So between these, you might have to jump around between resources to get what you want, but between these resources, you should be able to connect with these people. And just think, like if you can't find the first 10, you go to the next, I don't know, 100,000 that are out there and keep doing this. So again, just approach these people from a knowledge standpoint, right? Not to get an internship, even though we know that's what you want, but you don't have to tell them that. You're always gonna be prepared when you do your phone call or meeting with them. Keeping notes, and this is a big question, like how do you stay connected with people after you connect with them? So let's say they do connect with you on LinkedIn or you have an informational interview, then one of the best ways to stay connected is to tell them your progress. So if they gave you a piece of information during an informational interview and then you used it and you had some success, then tell them about that. Or, you know, even a few weeks later or a month later, you actually get an internship or you get an interview, then email and tell them that. That's the best way to keep connected because people will want to hear that. They're going to want to hear that you've been successful in this process. The other thing is if you're reading articles, like I told you to do before, and you see one and you're like, oh, this kind of reminds me of the conversation this person and I had, you can float an article to them and say, I thought about you when I read this article. It reminds me of the conversation we had, a month ago or something like that. That's why you have to keep really good notes when you're doing this networking process, and you really have to listen while you're doing the actual networking, or else you're not going to be able to do these follow-ups. Those are two ways to stay connected. Sometimes, and this is just a thing, you're not always going to have these great relationships with everyone you reach out to. And so sometimes the connection won't stay. I mean, and that's fine. You can do an update, you can send an article, but if it doesn't stay, that's fine, because again, you just keep reach out to different people. Some are going to stick longer than others.
I guess I just have a quick question. It's like when you do ultimately send someone an email, like what would you recommend writing as a subject line? Because I sometimes feel like I struggle with that, and I want to say networking chat, but like, I mean, or if I want to say informational interview, and I don't want them to think that I'm like going to interview them and, put them under that pressure.
I mean, you could always, I always would put something in the subject line that says like, I'm a student, and it could be, IU student curious about your career path. I mean, that's kind of like friendly, but I'm curious about your career path, or, IU student, yeah, maybe not informational interview, but like curious about your career path or something like that. Yeah, the subject line is tricky, and there's probably things, this article here on this cold contacting asks how to get a yes for informational interview, I think talks about that, having like a hook. But the subject line, yeah, you want it professional, but also like what's not going to get them to just kind of float right by it.
And then another question in the chat is like, if you spoke to someone a year ago and like now have progress to like kind of update them with, would it be appropriate to email them, or is that inappropriate because it's been a year?
I guess it depends what the intention is. Is it because you want to reconnect with that person, like genuinely, like I want to reconnect with them? Is it because you think that they really had an impact in your success? I guess it's like what the intention is. If it's I feel an obligation, but I'm not really sure I want it to go anywhere after that. If it's like this person might come back in my circle, like in my early professional life, so I feel like I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing, then yeah. I would go back to like what was the purpose of sending it after a year. That's why I want to like do the spreadsheets and keep track of people, because I mean, next thing you know, you all are busy, and when you go through recruiting, time goes by really fast, and next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, that was 3 weeks ago when I had that informational interview. You're always going to send a thank you right away, right? Within 24 hours, sending someone a thank you. Here's the thing about thank yous too, just as a note, I do an informational interview with someone, I take good notes. I wouldn't send a thank you like 5 minutes after I hang up the phone, because to me, that's like, you didn't really reflect about our conversation. It's a checkbox. It's like, I'm going to send this thank you so I can get it off my list, because that's not, I know I'm supposed to do that. But I would rather have a thank you like the next morning or even later, not oddly at 2 a.m., even though I know you all are up late, but like the next morning, because then I would think, here's a person that we had this conversation together and they've thought about what we talked about, and they took some time to write like our kind of reflective thoughts versus like, I gotta get this done right away because I don't want to forget, and it's work.
And then I guess another question I have is with regard to like cold contacting someone. I know that initially sometimes when you send an email, the other person may just like accidentally like, not see it, or they might just forget to respond. So how appropriate is it for you to follow up, like, maybe like within a week or 2 weeks, or like what's the timeline there?
Now, some people are like, 3 strikes you're out, like try 3 times. I'm kind of a 2-time, like I do it twice and then I just would move on. I would do a week time. And I mean, like if you send something on a Friday, like Fridays are probably not good days to send it. I think Fridays and Monday mornings are no-goes, like a Tuesday through Thursday kind of thing. But I give it a week. A week mark, I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm just following up on the email I sent last week, something like that. Because yeah, it could get buried. And that's the thing when we talk about like, who are you reaching out to? I mean, if you're shooting for the stars and you get someone, you're trying to, shoot for someone like way high up, then you have to think like you're either not going to get a response or it's going to be really lagged, versus, hey, I want something aspirational, but I'm going to go for someone that's kind of a little bit lower down on the food chain because you're probably going to response faster. And then if you make the connections lower down in the rankings, they're the people that can push you up. So I first talked to like a marketing associate and they're like, hey, I'll connect you with my supervisor who's like the next step up. And you're probably gonna have more success doing that.
Sorry, I keep talking, but
That's
there's
okay.
just the questions in the chat and people are messaging me. But for the subject line, if you send a thank you email, is it okay to just say thank you, or should we add something else in the subject line for a thank you email?
I would put something like thanks for the great conversation or something like that. Yeah, a little bit more than just thank you.
That's all for now.
Okay, cool. These are really basic, like cold contact reach outs. And this is super basic, but I mean, if you're being concise and you're thinking like, I have to get them to read this, you write them a really super long story about like why you're inspired to go in a field that they're, I mean, yeah, they're probably not going to read it. And so you want to get to the point. You just want to be like, hey, I want to talk to you about your career. So this is super basic. Just, you know, you want your information in there. You definitely want to tell them how you found their name. So if you said through the Kelly alumni group on LinkedIn, that's very legit. And then I always think like the hook is I'm particularly interested in, and then that should connect to something you have found out about this person. Like if I was going this supply chain, you know, ops thing, and I want to know more about supply chain, but I'm really interested in healthcare because I see that you've done this healthcare thing. So something in there that's a hook, because you got to convince these people that one, you're interested in them for a particular reason, not just like a general, hey, like help me out with an internship. This is a little better written. So thinking I'm a junior majoring in information systems, I found you through the LinkedIn alumni tool. I'm particularly interested in hearing about your work with the Flutter application and conferences you held in China. As a very specific, I mean, you'd have to find that information. And this is like after Martin, which is on his LinkedIn profile, as one of my goals in a position to globally, you know, collaborate in an Asian marketplace. So it's very, like, if I read that as a person, I'd be like, oh, wow, they really kind of have something they want to talk about that's very connected to what I do. And so that's the hook in that email. That's really 3 short paragraphs. I mean, I think it's a little bit better than this one. This one might be a little too simplified, and I don't think the writing's that great. It kind of looks more high schoolish than college, and this feels more college level. So it's like that. I mean, it's pretty short, right? And something in there like that middle paragraph that speaks to that person and gets them kind of excited to talk about it. That's where we be. Those are like, there's so much about LinkedIn. I could geek out on LinkedIn all the time. I'm going to tell you one thing that's super, super helpful is this official LinkedIn blog. I didn't even know they had this. Let me see if I can find it if I put it up here. I thought I saved it. Because what's cool about it, let's pull it up here. Is there's all these topics that you can go into. So like 7 to 8 posts on advancing your career, you know, just tons and tons of stuff on here. I never knew this even existed. From the very basic stuff to like the features, here's 42 posts on like doing your profile, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, which I never even knew this existed. So this has been kind of my go-to for like how I coach my students. Is like I said, I go to LinkedIn because they should know what they're talking about. These 2 articles are from the Muse, which I do like the Muse. I think their stuff is legit. They have really good career stuff, career material. And so these 2 articles I thought were really good for informational interviews, which is what you're doing on LinkedIn anyway, connecting with people. So yeah.
I guess a quick question someone has is like, how would we write about attending this specific event on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so definitely you'd want to tag, always like tag the Kelly School, right? Tag like Kelly Student Government. You could tag me because then I'd be like, oh, look at this person. And that'd be like an organic connection. If you did that, like this is a thing. Like if you did all that and then you said, I want to connect with Kirsten Prang on LinkedIn, and I saw that post, I was like, oh, this is someone that attended that event. Like I for sure would accept the connection. Or if that person said, hey, I'd like to talk to you, one-on-one about some of the stuff you talked about in that workshop, then I definitely would do it. So, I mean, posting about this is like, what's one thing you learned that you didn't know about LinkedIn before? What's a couple things that you picked up on? Didn't know that LinkedIn blog, existed or something like that. Probably won't have a picture. That's the other thing about like virtual stuff. I think it's a little like shooting a screenshot and then posting it on LinkedIn, especially if people's names are on it. I feel a little kind of funny about that. I did it for Martin's Zoom session, and I didn't think about it till afterwards, although it got a ton of hits because I tagged Google, and Martin's really he's really popular. So it had tons and tons of hits. But I thought about it afterwards, like it probably wasn't the proper thing to do unless you can block people's names out. But yeah, this is a professional development. It's something you're learning. So yeah. Should we do our my favorite, because I get to put like tips on here. So hopefully you all found some information. You're not gonna hurt my feelings if you still have questions. Hopefully no one's gonna hit the hat, but I don't know. I mean, if you do, it's okay. Like I'm tough. You got some information tonight that you either didn't know about or you think about LinkedIn a little bit differently, and that you kind of put it. You all are masters of like schedules and spreadsheets, and I would make it a discipline, like LinkedIn a discipline, especially when you really start getting into recruiting. But you don't want it to be something like you're like start doing the week you start applying to internships. Like if you're doing it consistently, then people are going to see this pattern. And yeah, I think that's how recruiters will go on your LinkedIn. They will.
Professor, I guess a quick thing. Would it be appropriate for them to reach out to you if they have any follow-up questions? Because I know some of the people attending aren't all from Kelly, so they didn't
absolutely.
Take
yeah.
Would you mind sharing your email in the group chat?
Sure.
So they can.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like I said Kelly because I mean I teach at Kelly, right? But these concepts are the same for everybody. I've worked. I can't get on there. Where's the chat thing? Can you put my email in there? You have my email, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I've worked with tons of business students that aren't going the traditional track. So like people going in the music and fashion and PR and all that stuff. But it's the same stuff, right? So whether you're in the business school or whatever you're doing, I mean, you're going to have recruiters, you're going to have people in companies that you're going to want to show what you're interested in. My daughter's in engineering, so like, and I am, although I cannot explain any of the stuff that she's learning, I did coach her on informational interviews with like Lily and Exxon. She's a freshman too. I'm like, what are you talking about with these people? But we did, she actually listened to me, which I thought was really nice because she didn't do that before. Apparently I know what I'm doing now that she's doing these things. But I coached her the same as I would coach any of the students at the business school for informational interviewing and for talking to recruiters. So the foundation's the same. That was a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
And then I guess like my other thing is like, when you do send someone a thank you email and let's say initially in the informational interview, you forgot to ask them for more references or maybe it just slipped their mind, would it be appropriate to ask them, do you think in the thank you email, like, hey, would you mind connecting me with more people at the company? Or is that kind of assuming that, making the wrong assumption?
It's okay. As long as you phrase it as, I really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anybody else you recommend that might be able to tell me more about this? Like, as long as it's framed as like, I'm coming from it as learning, right? I'm like, not trying to use you for anybody. My intention is to learn. My intention is I'm curious. And then I think it's fine. Especially if it all went well and you did everything right, then that person's going to be more than happy to give you the next connection. So I always think of it like a spider web. You're just trying to do that next ring and that next ring. And I mean, I'm going to tell you in all my professional life, there's no interview. There's no job I've ever gone into that speaking to somebody, like doing networking and asking questions and being curious and trying to learn about where I was trying to work. I didn't get some piece of information that changed my strategy going into an interview. And sometimes it was just like talking to someone and say, hey, do you have any advice about how I should approach this? I'm like kind of, I'm a little fuzzy about what they want in this interview. And this person said, well, this is what they want. And I was like, but that's not what it says. She's like, yeah, I know that's not what it says, but this is what they want. And that one piece of information from that one conversation changed my entire strategy going into the interview. So like that curiosity and just asking good questions from a point of learning will always work, really, as long as people feel like that's what you're doing.
Okay, it appears someone's trying to tag people on a LinkedIn post, but they won't show up. What do you think could be the possible cause of that? I think maybe if they just spelled the name wrong, or
Possibly, yeah.
okay. Do you have to be connected with someone if you want to tag them, or is it, can you tag really?
I don't think you have to be connected. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, that could possibly be it.
I don't think
Could
you
be.
have
I
to
don't
be.
think,
You
yeah.
could like tag celebrities. No, like, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that would not be my expertise on tagging and those kinds of things, but there's probably a LinkedIn blog on it that you could figure that out, because you can tag companies and stuff. I think even if you're not like following the companies, which I would, like, even on your LinkedIn profile when you're on there, like on mine, starting to feel like your influencers and things down here. And I know you can adjust your privacies for all this stuff. I actually spent some time on my LinkedIn profile a year and a half ago because I was changing positions. I always think it's funny when people give me a recommendation for budgets. And I was like, oh, I'm terrible at that stuff. I don't know why people put that on there, but I'm like, okay. But like your interest section and your influencers and things like that, getting a theme going there about who are you following, who are your influencers, what companies do you follow, groups and schools and things like that, and trying to get that to be looking like where you want to go, or reflecting, the things that you find interesting. And if y'all are into like podcasts and things like that, that's another easy way. I know people can't right now, or probably not, I can read a whole novel or book or a business book right now because you're doing so many things for school. But like podcasts, super easy to say, listen to a really interesting podcast on Planet Money about blah, 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 and posting that on LinkedIn. That's kind of easy to do too. In businessy.
I guess like my next question is kind of along the lines of like, I guess like LinkedIn premium is very expensive. So what are your thoughts there of like kind of investing the money in that?
I've had very few students. I've had some students do premium. I don't think you need it. Not for like, I don't think you need it. I really don't. I've never done premium. I think there's enough access and enough to do on it for free. Plus, if you're using like your alumni, all the information from the Alumni Association, IDIU, supposedly, and it probably got put off because of COVID, but supposedly the IU Alumni Association was going to like revamp that whole directory, and they're going to make it like much more student friendly for current students to connect with alumni. But it probably got put on hold, I'm sure, because it was supposed to be a big overhaul, and it kind of doesn't look like they've done that. The other thing is, you all are using Handshake, right? For Kelly Connect has gone away, and you're on Handshake, which freshmen may be like, what the heck is that? But that's your platform, right, to interact with recruiters now. It's Handshake deal. And one thing on here in Handshake is they have, if you go into your profile, which they let me have an account, but I don't know if it's going to look like what it does for students. You can set up your visibility in here as community. I don't know where it is. This is something you could ask the UCS. And you can actually, through Handshake, send messages to students and alumni that have similar experience. So like, let's say you want to do consulting at Accenture, through Handshake, in theory, from what I understand, is you can email students that have had like an internship at Accenture, or alumni that are in Handshake that have worked at Accenture, or recruiters that work for Accenture. And so, wow, that would be super simple. I'm not 100% crystal clear how that works. So that would be a question for the UCS. If you wanted to know, like especially freshmen, you're probably not on Handshake a lot right now, but that would be super easy. If people are in there, you can just, that was something they've never had before, which would be really nice. And Handshake is campus wide, so not exclusive to the business school. So anybody could do that. So whatever school you're in, you can go on Handshake and connect with people.
I just want to say it is past 8 o'clock. So
It is.
those of you staying on, like, feel free to keep asking questions as long as professor can answer them. But if you guys have to go, please feel free to go as well. The event has officially ended.
I know, I was happy to see all these people still hanging out.
I just had a quick question if you have a minute, actually.
Sure.
So obviously LinkedIn will let you know when someone views your profile. Is there kind of a consensus of it's like a point where it's, if you're about to meet with someone, is it considered odd to kind of look at their profile beforehand, or is that kind of?
I think it's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I mean, if their profile is public, then I would encourage it because you may get some really good questions from that. Where I think it gets on the creepy side is like going on their like Facebook or Instagram. I mean, like, hey, I saw that you and your family had a barbecue this weekend. And I'd be like, oh, that's a no-go, sir. I don't, no. So LinkedIn, I think, is fully appropriate to go look at people's profiles like before you go on an interview. I've done that before to see where people graduate. I saw on LinkedIn that you graduated from this school. I did that once, and the guy was like, he wasn't creeped out. He was like, oh yeah, I did. So I think LinkedIn's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't go any farther than that. Like I wouldn't like try to do some crazy Googling on the person. I mean, you might find stuff out you don't really want to know. So I'd stick to LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
There's another question in the chat. It says, how recent do articles need to be when posting them?
As long as they're relevant, right? I keep them fairly recent. I mean, there's some HBR, Harvard Business articles. There's one on LinkedIn. It's probably like 2015 that I still refer to about networking because I just love it so much because the concept behind the article hasn't changed. So as long as it's like something that's still relevant, I think it's fine.
I had a question. So earlier you were talking about like maintaining relationships after informational interviews. And I was just wondering what the best way to go about that is, whether it be through like LinkedIn or by continuing to email them every once in a while, or reaching out through other means, and like how to exactly like start conversations.
Yeah. So one thing is really important. So on the overall concept of that, so this is also goes to like, if you meet someone at a career fair, like how do you keep that connection going? If it's at a networking event, even before you even get to like, hey, I connected with them on LinkedIn or I had an informational interview. I think the biggest thing to remember is like when you get in networking situations, especially like these, like an event, you're gonna be nervous and you're gonna be anxious and all you're gonna think about is like, what am I supposed to say? And so you get in conversations and you're not like gonna really listen. So then when you try to reconnect with people, you're like, what do I say? But if you're really good, if you're really in the moment and you're asking a lot of questions and you're getting information from this person, you kind of put that information in a little savings bank, right? So let's say you're at a networking event and they share something more personal, like, hey, my son's into soccer. And you're like, oh, I used to play soccer. And yeah, he has this big tournament this weekend. And they tell you about it. And then maybe you're going to follow up with a thank you, or a couple weeks later, you're going to update them on like your interview process. And like pure gold is to be like, I hope like a little Jack soccer game went well. It's not creepy because they mentioned it. You were really listening. You're hitting on something personal. So something like that when you're doing the follow-up. But if it's like time is passing, you're thinking, how do I reconnect? Again, it's like, if you're listening and they're giving you advice and you're taking notes, then it's rounding back to a piece of advice they gave you that you actually used. It's telling them, hey, I've gone on to interviews. I just want to let you know, I really appreciate your support. something like that. It could be like the article thing, but again, you have to like be connecting it to something you talk about. So I think it kind of has to start with the initial like contact you have with the person, trying to get some information that can be used later. And again, it's not always going to work. Like sometimes some connections are just kind of, they might kind of like die off a little bit. The reach back to them has to have something besides, hey, I'm just touching base and saying, hey, like it does.
Right.
So it has to have a connection back, because then that's just kind of weird or awkward.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is always pose another question too. I mean, they might give you some advice, you go do something, and then you can round back and say, I'm following you up because I did this, and I actually have a follow-up question for you, when you have time. So you can do a follow-up question too. So there's a couple ways of doing it. I mean, there's like at least 2 or 3 really good ways. And then hopefully that's kind of spurring. Oh, the other question was, no, I just forgot it. How like to ask them to stay connected to is, you can always ask them either when you're talking to them, do you mind if I connect with you on LinkedIn, or would you mind if I email to stay connected with you? Or in the email, it could be, would you want to have a phone chat one day or something? So you can ask them like, can we keep this connection going, or what's the best way for me to stay in touch with you? That might be a good way to say it too. And don't be afraid, like, unless you're rude, these people are not going to be offended. And they know, like, again, if you're coming from a place of learning, they know you're learning this. If you're talking to someone, like my age, that's been around for a while, like, I'm not going to fault anybody if it's not perfect. I would fault someone that if it was not appropriate, but not if they're just trying to stay connected. I'd rather someone keep that going than like not do it out of fear of saying the wrong thing.
I guess just like a quick question, like, would it be appropriate, like, when I was networking, I would ultimately ask someone like, moving forward, what can I do to like maybe learn more about this position? And like, sometimes they'd recommend books and stuff like that. So do you think it's appropriate for you to just be like, oh, are there any books you would recommend I read about this position? Because I think that creates an opportunity for you to follow up with them. Or
books, or like, do you listen to any podcast, or asking them like, how do you stay up to date in your field? And then they'll tell you. So and that is just more like, hey, tell me how you stay up to date in the field. Like, how would you recommend me to like stay on top of current events in this area? Do you follow any newsletters, or how do you get your industry information? Yeah, that's a great way, because then when you go and read something they told you to read, you can follow back and say, oh my gosh, that article you recommended was so good. This is what I learned. Yeah, it's kind of strategic. I feel like you're playing, and it's not that it's not authentic or genuine, but you do have to have some strategy, or else you're just kind of, if you just wing it, then you do feel like you're just floating around, and without a strategy or like pre-thinking about some things that you really want to know. And it goes back to like being genuine about what you want to understand and know about the industry. Then it is hard to keep the connection going. But if you're like thinking about it ahead of time, you could get this string going that might be longer than you anticipated it would be.
I had a quick 2 questions. My first one was, is it okay? Do you have to say, I saw this on your LinkedIn, or I saw this on your resume before bringing it up? Or can you just let them assume that you did look over their LinkedIn, since it is very clear that it says like, this person viewed your LinkedIn at this time? So is it okay to just make it more natural rather than something creepy? Like, I'm not going to bring up like their divorce, but
yeah, right. Like, I like the reference. So, because some people have contacted me, they like, I saw your profile on, the Kelly website or something. I kind of like to know where people get it, but I mean, you don't have to, as long as it's, I think it's very specific information. They're probably going to be like, oh, this person's done their research. And if it's all professional stuff, they're going to know you got it from your LinkedIn. Like if I was doing a cold contact, like I'd never reached out to them before, then I would definitely tell them how I found their information. But if it was like a cold one, I found your name here. So they know you're finding it from a legit source.
And my second question was, if somebody's helped you out quite a bit and they're a professional in the field, how do you let them know how thankful you are rather than just saying thank you 10 times?
Yeah. So if it was somebody, like, let's say it's a relative or a friend of a relative, or like you got the connection through like some personal connections versus like just off LinkedIn, then, I mean, it might be, I mean, the next level up is like a handwritten thank you card. People love that stuff. Normally I tell people just do it through email because it's faster. But if it's at the point of like this person's helped you a lot. So for instance, when I career coach people, some people through their whole time in college, you know, they would always send me like the thank you email, but like their senior year, no one ever gave me like gifts, maybe like a coffee mug, but most of the time, like an actual letter, like someone saying, this has meant so much to me that you would take this time, like an actual heartfelt letter. I saved all those. Those are probably like my favorite things from coaching students. So I think when you get to the point where you're like, this has really impacted my life, yeah, a handwritten actual letter card.
Thank you.
Yeah, yep. You'd be surprised. People save those things because I don't think people do that enough anymore, like write out actual cards like that. In recruiting, you know, after an interview, you can do handwritten cards if you can get it to them. But my hesitancy with like during interviewing time is like, what if, you know, they're traveling and they don't get your thank you for 2 weeks, then it looks like you didn't send one. But you could do duo too. You could do a email thank you, they get it right away. And you could also do something handwritten because some of them really like that too.
Yeah, that's weird. It's probably like the same, but
yeah. You guys are asking great questions. Oh my gosh. Awesome. Wear my coaching hat tonight.
Okay, so if no one has any other questions, I think this would be an appropriate time to call it a night. But I just want to say thank you everyone for attending. We really enjoyed this. And I know we had a lot of fun like putting this together, really thinking of things that we thought, you know, would really help you guys moving forward with securing an internship. Please feel free to like email me. I left my email in the chat, and I know Professor Prangs has already been in the chat as well. Please feel free to follow up with any of us, and I'm sure we'd be happy to help you further as this progresses.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.